Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session with Mr. Anadin Bans. And he is going to be doing our second session on gardening. And we hope to have further sessions with Anadin, hopefully. But today will just be a continuation of what we were speaking about on Thursday. Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah. And if you have any questions after this video, then I will also share that with you, the link, and then you can ask your questions and we can send them to Anadin and he can respond to those questions. And I have also received some questions, so if he doesn't cover them in the course of the training, then I will share those with him and he can respond. So I'm going to switch my video off. I'll be controlling the slides. And yeah, Anadin, I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Hi, Claire. Thank you very much. It's a real experience for me to do training in this way. And last week was real nice, especially from the positive response of the partners who was part of the training. And I really enjoy working, especially for SCET and so on, and specifically the gardeners. It's real an experience for me in doing training this way. The questions from last week, if there's any questions from last, as Claire stated, is no problem. You can always send your questions to Claire and then I'll respond through her regarding your questions. Thank you very much. Drip irrigation, yes, drip irrigation is one irrigation system that we use to water our plants. It is so our plants cannot grow without water. And the slide in front of me is the one that we normally use, especially in community gardens. But in community gardens to do drip irrigation, and you can see here, you have a tank, and then from the tank you have your pipes, and it goes through the pipes to the plants, and then each of these pipes are lying on the ground to have a dripper, and then the dripper, and then the water drips next to the plant. It's actually your best way in conserving water. Can I have just a break? Some disturbances here. Okay. I saw it all. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
no problem.
I have to go to check it out. But with the drip irrigation, yes, but water, what's the reason that we water our plants? I think there must be a reason why we water our plants. And one reason is water is actually a dissolvent of nutrients. And that is important. If we water our plants, we actually have to water the plant, but you make sure that the nutrients which are in the soil, it is dissolved with the water, and now the roots can take it up and send it to the leaves. So that is one way, one function of water. But the other function of water is actually, especially in the water areas, but all areas actually, is to make sure that the soil stays cool in your summer times and so on. So that is one way function of water. The other function of water is actually to make sure that the leaf stays firm. So when the leaves of a plant stays firm, it means it can catch the sunlight much better to make food. Seeing that is the leaf who's making the food for the plant. So water plays an important role when it comes to plant production. And also the one function of water is during germination. Our seeds need germination, water for germination to take place. So water, the function of water is actually most of that I've mentioned now. Drip irrigation is one way, it's actually the best way to save water. And you can see here, it's a tank, and it is filled with water. It could be, that tank could be wastewater. It could, most of the time, it is municipal water that they use there fill it with water, and then from there it is going into the garden. So drip irrigation is actually the best way. It is not uh, sensitive to the wind. There's no wind involvement. The water is just dripping, and that is for me the best way to water your plants. There. Now this is the pattern what you see in the ground. When it is, it's the same dripper line that you see here. We have a clay soil, a loamy soil, and a sandy soil. Now, on each of these blue pattern that you see here is actually how the pattern is formed when it is a clay soil or a loamy soil or sandy soil. So when it is sandy soil, your drip irrigation is not real suitable for sandy soil, seeing that it's a smaller area that it wet. But when it comes to loamy or clay soil, it covers a much bigger areas. But as I've said in my previous or in my previous presentation, is that when you put compost, crop manure, those things into the soil and sand soil, then you get the same characteristics of clay soil. And that is why it's so important in each of our gardens, if it is community gardens or church or household gardens, your crop manure is the most important fertilizers that you can add to the soil. You don't not only fertilize the soil, but you actually improve the structure, especially of sand soil. And the soil becomes much better. It retains the water, retains the nutrients for longer periods, instead of just leaching it out deeper into the soil during irrigation. Okay. The watering can, most of us, and even me myself, is using a watering can. Watering can, but when you use a watering can, you must mulch your garden, your beds. It is very important. Seeing that the mulching helps that the water that you apply with the watering can stays for a longer period. And the also important thing is with the mulching, if you use a watering can, the water is just not rolling from the bed, but it stays there around the plant, and the mulching helps actually that the water infiltrate into the soil. So a watering can is one method that we also can use to water our plants. And this is only an example, the nozzle that you use. If it is a one with fine openings, those fine openings, those are actually the best ones. The bigger ones release too much water, and you can't go far with that water. So the ones which has a very fine openings is actually your best ones to water your plants. And here another watering system. We're talking about the self-watering system here, is where you have a 2-liter bottle with holes, fine holes around it, and with holes in it, you plant it actually next to your seedling that you planted. You can even with a seed also. And only thing that you will do when you water is put the water into the bottle, which is in the soil, and it drips by itself. Now the holes in the bottle here in the picture, it looks like it is very wide, but it's very fine. It must be very fine so that it timelessly that it supply water to the roots. And when you have a liquid fertilizers, which is a little bit expensive, you can also add it to that bottle, and that is how you fertilize your soil. But this is a nice method if you can water it, and if you have only a few holes in it, And then it will drip very timelessly, supply the water into the soil. And it's a nice way compared to your watering can, but then you need more of these watering cans, bottles, plant it, and then make it holes and plant it, and then you can water your plants like that. Clear? Awesome. Yes, it's a very practical way how to use a watering can. So the moment that you see that the water is coming out of the nozzles, then you have to start to walk. Otherwise, you put too much water at one place. So you have to walk. And what we can see here is beds that we have made. Maybe Clay, you can go to another slide. I think it's the same one. There's another one, a demonstration that I've done yeah. Okay, can we just go back? Yes. There's a demonstration that I've done to show how to use a watering can. So the moment that you see that the water is coming out of the nozzle, and then you start to walk on the bed or alongside the bed. Unfortunately, we have to maybe you have to uh, 2 meter by 1 meter bed is very small, but I can assure you, you need more water, maybe around 2 to 3 of these watering cans to water your soil. Now, and that is why that mulching is so important. Here you can see no mulching, nothing. It was only bare land. It's loose. So if you leave it like that, then the water will evaporate much easier and the soil becomes quicker or faster drier. But if you have a mulching on top of your soil where the seedlings stand between the mulching, then the mulching helps to retain the water around the roots of the plants. Yes, also, well, a picture where the guys is doing the planting with the drip irrigation around there. That is a commercial way of doing it. So the guys do have water here. Maybe we can just go through the slide, the soil preparation. We've discussed it in our previous previous sessions. Yeah, container gardening. I think that is that and container gardening will also work in a community or a organizational garden. And yeah, your watering can works very beautiful here in these spaces that you plant your where you do your sowing and planting in the tires, and we can see the tires is actually cut much wider here to the track, up to the track of the tire, so that you enlarge the space to widen the space where you intend to do the planting. This method is for me one of the best methods where we do not have enough water. Instead of in the soil, we make our own growth medium, and it could be compost, it could be crawl manure mixed with sand. I prefer river sand, but sand is more than enough, mixed with crawl manure, and then crawl manure, and you can add those here in the tires. And that crawl manure helps actually to retain the water in the tire. And remember, when it comes to container gardening, soil is not good. Soil is not good. You need to mix your soil with compost. Otherwise, if it is only soil in the tires, then that soil becomes very hard, especially when you do not irrigate on time. So soil mixed with crawl manure, that is the best growth medium for me to plant in tires. Another one, container gardening is beautiful. If we can do container gardens in a community garden, for me, it's for me the best way is when we do not have enough water. This is an example, youngsters in Oudtshoorn, they've done very well. Here we can see they also make use of a watering can, but what they've done, they've made so shallow furrows, and they've planted in those furrows, and that is also a way to just to make sure that the water stays around the plant. But they've also made use of a watering can. And they do very well with their plants. So this is another way, instead of only a bed, and we can see here it's a raised bed, but then it's a raised bed, but they've done furrows between, they make furrows and they plant in the furrows, and that furrows helps actually to retain the water around those plants. And that is also a method that we in a community garden can use to save our water. Okay, this is a garden there in Daniel scale, under shade net, and the shade net is for me in community gardens also a good thing. If we use the shade net, you create the environment, a favorable growth environment for your seedlings. Here it is drip irrigation. Luckily here the guys do have 3 tanks. So the garden is a little bit wide, and they're doing very well there in Daniel scale with their garden. The shade net, what is the function of the shade net? I think that is what we should talk about. What is the function of that shade net? First of all, it creates a growth environment for the plants. So the plants grow very nice in that warm weather. When it is hot, then the plant doesn't receive too much direct sunlight. So the shade net actually spread the sunlight in that area instead of where the sun is shining directly on the plant. That is the one. The other function of a shade net is to control the wind speed. So in the area, in that space, the wind is not that strong around the plant. And maybe it could be a disadvantage also, seeing that if there's no wind around the plants, then the leaves will not dry off, and maybe diseases could also develop. But in everything that we start when it comes to garden, there's always disadvantages and advantages. Another advantage for shade net is hail, and especially in your Tata area, Matati Hill areas, even in Merwell where it's very hot, those areas are exposed to hailstorms. So it helps to protect the plant against hail. And also another advantage is birds. Birds could be a real problem for you, especially when you planted maize or sweet corn. They are real problems. So it protects your plant actually against birds and so on. But so shade net is for me one of those methods that I prefer to use if it is affordable. It's very expensive, but if you can afford it, that is one way to make sure that your plant grow very nicely in that space. Here you can see drip irrigation. It's a drip irrigation system, and I just want to show us here what happens in the beginning. Okay, they've planted here, and it looks like if it is compost here, here's what we have done there. So, but this is a pattern that what the drip does. When you start with the irrigation, then you have these wet spots, but after all, in a half-hour time, then you'll see only one wet stripe up alongside the pipe that you will find. So the full area at the end of that half an hour will be fully wet. Okay. Diseases. Okay, diseases, yes. Yeah, I'm saying always, if you plant a seedling and in an area where there's no plants, you expect that diseases will not be there, but it is not like that. Diseases and insects will always be there, even in the shade net, even in that shade net or shade cloth, you will find insects, you'll find diseases. The moment, that's why I'm saying, the moment that you put a plant in the ground, you attract diseases and also especially insects and so on. So plant diseases, they disturb the normal growth of the plant. It is so causes could be from the organism. An organism is normally your fungus, or it could be a bacteria, or it could be a virus. Those organisms are the ones who causes diseases to our plants. When it comes to environmental factors, and that is about environmental factors is hot, water stress. Water stress is environmental factor which causes a disease to your plant. Or heat causes diseases to your plants. Or it could be you as one which does not clean your hands properly before working with your handling your plants. You can also the one who spread disease, and it is so, guys. When you are a smoker, you are actually the one who spread the mosaic virus to plants, and you are not affected by that organism, but you spread it. So if you are a smoker, please do not handle your plants or tools. Wash your hands properly with water and soap. That would be adequate before you working with your plants and in the soil. Otherwise, you are actually the spreader of diseases to your plants. Now, fungus, there are different funguses that you will find. Fungus, supposed to, there's a spell error. It's supposed to be fungus, not fungi. But there's different types of fungus that you'll find. The downy mildew, you'll find it in, and also powdery mildew. You'll find it especially on your pumpkins. Soft rot, your carrots is very vulnerable to soft rot. And also seedlings, when it's especially your onions and your all kinds of seedlings, they are also they are not tolerant to soft rot fungus. So those are the things that you consider. Early blight, your potatoes are very sensitive to early blight, and early blight means actually in the early growing season here in August, September month, then we talk about early blight. But you also have late blight, meaning late blight is a fungus that you'll find here in autumn and the beginning of winter. And anthracnosis, root and stem rot, those are ones, yes, which causes problems, especially on seedlings. Also soft rot and root and stem rot are the ones which are sensitive. Our seedlings are very sensitive to. Post-harvesting rotting in vegetables and fruit. It also happens after you've harvest. Maybe you didn't harvest properly. There's some leftovers of your fruit or vegetables, and they become rotten. like your peppers or your tomatoes, they start to rot, and it's not a good thing to leave rotten tomatoes or peppers or any kind of vegetables in your garden. Rather work it cultivate it into the soil. Otherwise, if you leave it like that, it is a host for insects. Some of our insects utilize those rotten fruit to feed on, such as your fruit fly and your false codling moth or your codling moth. And the females, they utilize these to feed on and lays their eggs into these rotten vegetables. So sanitation practices means actually removing all those which is not needed in the garden, the leftovers of your previous crop, and put it in a compost heap. That is the best, or work it into the soil. That is one of the practices which is good for me, and it actually helps to fertilize the soil if you utilize the practices. Only few downy mildew is an example of downy mildew. It becomes with yellow oil spot, and then it becomes white. Those spots becomes white, and later on it starts to spread. And remember, a fungus. This is a fungus. A fungus is a low order plant. It's actually a plant, but it's a plant that cannot makes its own energy. So it needs a host, and that host could be is normally another plant, or it is a bread and a bread, and we saw it on a bread. If you leave bread, it becomes old in the cabin. Later on, you will see these it becomes green or black, and that is typical what the fungus is utilized. It utilizes the bread, the energy in the bread to grow itself. So this is a downy mildew. This is just an example of how it looks like. Soft rot. Oh, soft rot. Yes. Soft rot. Potatoes. Sorry, potatoes. Yes. Is one example of soft rot. Carrots also is also vulnerable to or sensitive to soft rot. Sweet potato also. Yes, those are crops growing underneath the soil, so they are sensitive to these soft rot. And yeah, so to control diseases, and it's best to buy certified seeds or plant material. The best way of controlling diseases is to buy certified seeds. I cannot emphasize that too much. Okay. Powdery mildew, also an example of powdery mildew. Again, it also starts here between the veins of plants or the leaf of a plant. And remember, the leaf of the plant is the one who's make the energy for the plant, or the carbohydrates for the plant. So that carbohydrates which the leaf is making, it is utilized by the powdery mildew or any bacteria, virus, or fungus. They utilize the energy which is inside of the leaf for their own development. Blight. Potatoes are very sensitive to blight. It is so. It's very sensitive to blight, but not very sensitive that it means we mustn't plant potatoes. If your water source, remember, your water source is adequate, and it will grow for 4 months, and you have enough water, don't let blight prevent you from planting. But if you make sure that you utilize the seedlings, the seeds of the potato is certified, um, that you plant at the right time, that you make sure that your tools are clean, you yourself wash your hands regularly, then you will end up with a plant which grows very nicely. Early blight also starts here. You can see the yellow spots here, and later on the leaf becomes dry. If it is not controlled, then the leaf at the end of the day becomes yellow, dries off, and then fall off. And if a leaf falls off, it means there's no plant part which can make energy for the plant. Root rot, same with soft rot. Carrots is sensitive to that. Sensitive to it. Also, one and this is we can see here. If these examples that we have here, it's actually carrots which should have been removed out of the soil already. So when you see your crop is ready to be harvested, starts with the harvesting, so that you do not leave the plant like that, and then all the diseases starts to develop in the garden. Post-harvesting rotting, yes, post-harvesting rotting is similar. This is a citrus or oranges. And if you leave it in a cabin or so in a dark spot area, then you actually help these fungus to develop on your crop. The same to your tomatoes, the same with your potatoes, the same with peppers and so on. The best is if you can store it, if you harvest it, do not store it for too long periods in refrigeration or so. Rather use it in a short time so that you do not help these fungus to develop onto your yield. But that is a typical way of when orange is just lying there, maybe in the garden or in the house, then it starts to develop these rotting. And these fungus, they spread with spores. So if you blow onto a bread, then you see the dust. And those dust is made up with individual spores. And it's actually the seed of the fungus. So if we have these in our garden, it actually helps that diseases or that fungus to be spread, to develop and to spread. So what I'm saying is if you have harvest, you see that you are finished with the harvesting, but there's a tomato in your yard, remove it, bury it, or put it in a compost. That would be the best way to control your funguses. Don't leave it there. Otherwise, you develop these fungus you help these fungus to develop on the orange or tomato or even a bread or so on. And which is not a good practices. The best is to see, you can't utilize yourself or consume it yourself, is bury it in the ground or after harvesting before it developed like this, or you can put it in the compost. Bacteria spot and vascular wilting cancers and scab diseases is also an organism. Your fungus is the ones that really are best controlled. But when it comes to bacteria and also viruses, then it becomes very difficult. I prefer rather to remove all my plants from the garden if I find out it's a bacteria, since it's very difficult, it's expensive to, to control it. So your sanitation practices and your hygiene practices, hygiene meaning yourself, make sure that you are clean, that you wash your hands before you use your handle, your tools, your planting materials such as your seed or seedlings. That is one way to control bacteria or viruses or funguses. Bacteria spot. Oh, your beans are very sensitive to it. Maybe think that we are here with bacteria spot. We must be very careful. And we see on this leaf on the left side of us is that we see these spots around here. In the beginning, it is yellow. In the beginning, it is yellow. Now, there's a difference between bacterial spot and magnesium or manganese deficiency. And those manganese and magnesium deficiency, they are nutrient elements. So they have the same similar symptoms. So we have to make sure that we do not think it is bacterial spot. Maybe it could be also a deficiency of one of other nutrient element. But on a later stage, you will see that the leaf starts to dries off, fall off, and then on a later, then the plant suffers from a lack of energy to it. Later on, it spread to the pots, the green bean pots. So it starts on the leaves, but later if it is not controlled, then it starts it spread to the pots of the plant. Vascular wilting, especially of seedlings, is also a bacteria which causes death. But I can assure us, even if we have all these diseases and insects, and so that mustn't hinder us not to do our planting. I love planting, and I accept when I have problems in my garden. I just want, it's important that we monitor it, make sure that we monitor it and ask questions. Most of the time, the older people, I don't know if the correct word to say, but the senior people in the community, they know exactly how to handle these cases. So it's best to ask, and you can also send pictures to me through sketch, and I can come up with maybe a solution for you how it started and so on. But vascular wilting is also a bacterial organism causes it, and it actually influences the juice movement in the plant. There are two types of vines, or not vines, or yes, vines in the plant. The ones xylem and the phloem. Those are the ones responsible for the transportation of the water and the minerals up to the leaves. But then the phloem is the one responsible for the energy, the carbon hydrates back to other parts of the plants. So it actually disturbs the movement of water and your carbohydrates in the plant. That is what it actually causes. Scaps, potatoes, and I think most of us have already seen these scaps. Tomatoes also, that is also typical bacteria. And that's why this one is typical when there's no a crop rotation program. You planting tomatoes or potatoes year in and year out on the same area. And that is important as to do crop rotation. Now, the moment that you have scabs on your potatoes, then it takes 4 years for you to come back with potatoes on that soil. So doing crop rotation on a regular basis, and you'll really control your subsoil or your soil-borne diseases. Um, uh, Crop rotation is very important. Here's also on tomatoes that you'll find it the same as here for potatoes. And remember, potatoes are family of tomatoes. Potato belong to the tomato family. So they will have the same or the similar symptoms or disease symptoms or specific symptoms, diseases that you'll find there. So crop rotation is very important. Viruses, mosaic virus, ring spot leaf roll. Oh yes, a mosaic virus is a one which can be caused through tobacco, and normally it is, if we have it, then that is a problem that you have caused to your plants, mosaic virus. Seeing that if you are a smoker, then if you are a smoker, you are actually spreading that disease. It's not any other organism, but you as a gardener could be a problem when you as a smoker, you do not wash your hands, and then that virus is spread to your plants, and then it makes your plants sick. Ring spot, ring spot. Now, a ring spot, we must be very careful when it is a ring spot before we can say this is a virus. That symptoms that we see here in front of us is actually, it could also be a thrip insect which causes these type of diseases, if I can say it like that. So if you, unfortunately, we do not have maybe hopefully we have a slide here. We show thrips, what causes it, but here we can see it's ring spots, and it is these spots. It differ from your thrip damages. This one can cause real problems for you. The moment that you have a virus in your plants, my advice to all the gardeners is remove them and start over. Environmental factors causing diseases, temperature, yes, temperature, heat, cold temperatures, soil moisture. We talk a lot about soil moisture, but I think we can say soil water, maybe not moisture, but soil water causes real problems for us, seeing that there's a lack of oxygen in the soil. A lack of light, less light in the soil or in the environment, in the air, causes also problems. It actually helps diseases to develop with less sunlight. So the plant cannot make energy for him to grow strong through the limited light. So, and that's why we have to make sure that our plants must receive light. Air pollution is a real problem. That dirt lands on the leaf, and the leaf becomes contaminated, meaning it cannot breathe. So that is when your plant struggles and it gets sick due to air pollution. So yes, luckily if we do with watering can, we apply water with watering can, that helps actually to make sure that the dirt and dust are removed from the leaves of a plant, but then you need air movement between the plants to make it dry, the leaves dry. Nutrient deficiency is also in wrong cultivation practices. So what is wrong cultivation practices? Shallow digging is a one wrong cultivation practices. If you do your practices, your digging shallow, then the plants will not grow very nice in the soil. So the best way, and I again emphasis on that, is deep digging, making your soil deep, loose, all over the bedding, so that your plant roots can grow very nicely here in the ground. So wrong cultivation practices for me, one is shallow digging, also not implying crop rotation. That is a cultivation practices. So make sure that you do this into your garden. So if you, for this year, I've planted cabbages, and that cabbages could be broccoli, it could be Brussels sprout, it could be cauliflower, or the cabbage head. You can plant that on the same area for the full year. But after 12 months, you have to come with a new family which are not related to cabbages. Maybe green bean would be the best option when you planted cabbages on that specific area. Spreading of diseases. Wind is one. Wind, the rain, yes, insects, aphids, especially for leaf roll. Leaf roll virus, meaning that the leaf is actually roll around, or yes, it's not like flat. So aphids, they are responsible for spreading of leaf roll. Then seeds. Now I know in our communities that we multiply seeds. So we have buy a pumpkin, a nice, beautiful pumpkin, there at one of the retail shops, and we buy and see, oh, the seeds look good, but and we utilize these seeds in our gardens. So if that pumpkin do have a virus or a bacteria or a fungus to it, the seed will also have that. So the moment that you plant it, sowing it, they're actually also spreading the diseases into your healthy soil. So I know that seeds are very expensive. It is. So most of our people say to me, man, I use my own seeds, or I get seeds from my neighbor. Yes, I understand that, but we must also keep in mind that those seeds are not certified disease-free or insect-free. So you are actually spreading the diseases if you utilize, for example, Anadin bun seed. He has his own way of doing the things, and he's careless. So if you utilize my seed from my pumpkins or my tomatoes or my potato, then you're actually spreading the disease. Contaminated seedlings, the same. Contaminated seedlings are also a problem, maybe contaminated. It is a sick diseases, sick seedlings that you plant. People can also, and I've mentioned us, mosaic virus, animals, yes, tools and equipment which are not clean. So after we have worked with our tools, we clean it, and yes, with water, remove all the dirt, the mud, before we store it. Control of disease, quarantine, and certification. Oh, those are very high words and so on. But cultural practices, crop rotation, the cultural practices actually crop rotation, planting time, the irrigation that you use. That is what you can, those practices that you can use to control diseases. Irrigation, for example. Overhead irrigation, that is not a good way of watering your plant, seeing that your leaf stays wet. So if leaf stays for long periods wet, that spores of your fungus, if it lands on it, the leaf is moisture, then it grows, it germinates, and it grows into the leaf, and that is how that spores multiply onto that leaf by using drip irrigation system or flood irrigation system, the furrow irrigation, or your watering can, where you apply the water here at the ground and not on top of the leaves, then that's a way also, practices to control your diseases. Sanitation practices is where we remove all the leftovers of the previous crop. We put it in the soil or we put it in a compost heap. That is one way, that is sanitation practices. Biology control, oh sorry. It is where we, say for example, we have snails in our garden. Instead of making use of bait, which is a chemical, we can bring in our goose to feed on it. That is one way. Or by bringing in ladybirds, instead of using hard chemicals to control insects or diseases, we can bring in plants or a host plant, for example, where we plant it and the diseases will develop on that side, and that is how we control it. Or important thing for me, which is important, is resistant cultivars. Now those cultivars, I can maybe give us an example of what is a cultivar. You have your carrots. Now there's different types of carrots for different conditions, like your Cape Market. Now Cape Market is a cultivar carrot which grows the best in sandy soil. So if you have sandy soil, then you can utilize, you can make use of your Cape Market. If it is heavier soil such as clay or a loamy soil, which is a little bit heavier than sand soil, then your Cape Market will not grow very nice there in such soil. So the best is then your Kiroda, which will grow much better in heavier soil. And then chemical control, which is not for me a good thing in community gardens, or rather stay away with chemical control. Insects, yeah. There are different types of insects. You have your cutworms, snails, American bollworm, thrips, or yeah, chewing. Yeah, aphids, thrips, red spider mice, leaf spiders, fruit fly, codling moth, and then nematodes and eelworms and so on. But they are then classified or divided into chewing insects. Now, chewing insects is like your cutworms, snails, American bollworms. There's a cutworm, a very nice one. Especially with your green beans. I think you can stay there, Claire. Yeah. Cutworms, your green beans are really sensitive to cutworms. And there you can see on the left picture how it feed on it. Actually feed it. The feeding of it is in the form of a cutting, and then your plant is just falling off. That happens early in the morning. Early in the morning that it happens. So if you wake up and then you see your plants, your green beans look like this, especially when it is still green, the stem of it is still green, then you can just open up the ground next to the plant, then you'll find it there. And it's normally a gray color that it is. Okay. Snails, yes, snails. That's the one. This is a real problem, especially for cabbages. It's a real problem. The Western Cape, yeah, in the Eastern Cape also, in my garden, it's a real problem. But mulching helps a lot, especially when you have these sawdust, which is very rough with it sharp edges of it. If you utilize those as a mulching, you really control these guys. Seeing that these edges are very sharp and it cut it actually and it cut the snail. So if you have a mulching, then it helps to control your snails. But yeast is also a way that you can use it by putting, take a 2-liter bottle, put it in the soil at strategic places here in your garden and fill it up with water and put yeast to it. Then that yeast attracts it and it falls into that water, and that is a way to control it. Please don't use salt onto your ground. That is not a good practices for me. Some of our gardeners using salt, saying that the salt is actually drying out the body of the snail. But the disadvantage is actually you're putting too much salt to your garden, and that is not what you want. So stay away with that. If you have to use that in mulching, it's a problem. Then you can put water in a bucket, a 5-liter bucket. Then you can actually add all the bag of soil or salt, and then you can mix it, make it salty water, and then you can put those guys into that salty water, but not onto the ground. But for me, the best way in doing this is actually your gooses to control snails and also your yeast. American bollworm, those one is different compared to the cutting worm, but this one is green. This one is green, and it makes beautiful cylindrous holes in your fruit, like your green beans, your tomatoes, and apples also. They are a real problem. And when you scout for it or monitor it, you look at the new growth of a plant. That is where you're looking for it. New growth of a plant, they will feed on new growth, and then if on a later stage, then they move to your fruit, your tomato or your green bean. If there's less new growth on the plant, they move to your green beans, and they make these beautiful holes into your plant. Aphids, yes, aphids is actually a vector of leaf roll, and cabbages is they love the cabbages and so on. By planting cabbages in the summer, then you attract these guys. They love cabbages, and then the cabbages doesn't grow very nicely, and they also starting making a mold to the leaves, and the leaf becomes black. So, and that mold is also attraction to diseases such as funguses and so on. But viruses, where these guys is sucking, they're sucking mouth parts. If they feed on the plant, then they actually, at that open wound, they actually spread the virus to your plant. So by planting cabbages in the cooler time of the year, then they are not active that time of the year. Important thing in terms of cultivar, especially cabbages. Drumhead is a cultivar that are spread as you can bought it there at ShopRite, Checkers, and so on. Or rather stay away from drumhead. You can plant any other cultivar, but drumhead is a cultivar which is very sensitive. These guys, these aphids, they love drumhead cabbages. So do not buy that cultivar. Rather buy any other cultivar that you'll find on the market, but not drumhead. Trips, sucky mouth parts. again, uh, especially on tomatoes, you'll find thrips on tomatoes, and then on the fruits itself, you will find here at the petiole, you'll find there the top part where the fruit hangs. That part, the damages is around the petiole of fruit. That is where you'll find the damages, and where it do the sucking or the feeding, then that part where it feeds on, that becomes wooden, and it's actually not if you buy such a fruit, it's not it's the presentation is not good. We're talking about cosmetic damages that it causes. You can, there's nothing wrong with it, tomato or pepper or so on, but it doesn't present the fruit, the vegetable doesn't present itself good for someone to buy it. Red spider mite, oh, tomatoes, guys, tomatoes, there are more than 6 insects who attacks tomatoes, and red spider mite is the one, he loves to be on tomato plants. So, and it attacks the older leaves, not the young leaves. It takes the older leaves, and you'll find it at the rear side of the leaf. That is where you'll find it. If you turn the leaf in the direction to the sun, and then you'll see the movement of these spots, red spots that you'll find there, and you know exactly it is this one. Make sure that you make use of mulching, and also, yeah, make sure, seeing that if there's dust around your dust, and that is where the shape net is so nice. It controls your red spider mite much better. When your plant is dusty, then they love that type of tomato plants. But if there's no dust, then this is a way to control it. But the other one also is sugar water that you can use, spread sugar water onto the leaves, and it's also a way to control your red spider mites. Okay. Leaf miners, this is typical what you still see on the leaves. But I just want to say to us, if you see only one insect on your plant, you don't need to run to the tractor and the spraying tank and so on, and go with the tractor in and spray for your plants. No need. If we can make sure that we do all the practices correctly, such as soil preparation, watering of our plants, make sure that we feed our plants, and certified seed or seedlings that we use, then we can make sure that is one way to control our insects and diseases. So I don't want us to, when you see one insect, then you are concerned about it. If your plant is growing very vigorously, they can outgrow diseases and also insects. Fruit fly, maybe when we have tomatoes, it is a real problem, but tomatoes, and maybe if we can stay away from tomatoes, if we're seeing the tomatoes stay for so long, to grow for so long period, 8 months, but you actually start harvesting from your tomatoes here from the 3rd, 4th month that you will start harvesting it. But the fruit fly is a real problem. It doesn't feed on the fruit itself, but it lays its eggs in the fruit. So it has appendages here, the rear side of it, it is abdomen, and it penetrates into the fruit, and it lays, the female, she lays her eggs just underneath the skin of fruits. So, but she's not the problem. It's the larvae, the caterpillars feeding on a tomato, or on a pepper, or on a potato, or on the apples or peaches and so on. They are the real problem. nematodes, potatoes and eelworms and so on. They are a real problem when you do the planting from year on with the same crop. So by crop rotation, doing crop rotation, that is one way to control your soil insects. And you can't see them with the naked eye. They are microscopic, very small. They are in the soil and it detects the roots and it actually blocking the juice movement in the roots, and it utilizes all the nutrients and everything for itself, and it is not going up to the leaves or coming down to the roots. So that is what it does. So if you have these type of problems, then it takes years for you to come back to with vegetables. Then you have to plant something else in that in your garden so that you do not multiply these small insects in the soil. Okay, spreading. Weeds. I think before we can start with talking about weeds. Now, weeds is a plant which grows on a space where you do not want it to grow. So, meaning that if you have planted carrots, for example, on a specific area, you harvest it, and then you decide to plant maybe potatoes after that. But you will find as the potatoes is standing there, you will find also carrots starts to germinate and starts to grow. Meaning it's leftovers of the previous crop carrots, which starts to grow there. It means that the carrots is now a weed plant. So we have to remove it. But I know in our household gardens, we will not remove that one. But weeds, the problem with weeds is that it competes with your plant for water, for nutrients, and also for sunlight. That is what it competes for. And those are weeds plants are the ones which grow very fast. They grow very fast. So you have to control your weeds at the early stage of their growth. So 2 weeks after germination, 2 weeks after germination, you have to control your weeds. And 2 weeks after planting, when the seedlings that you put into the soil, you have to control your weeds in the first month of growth. If it is in the second month, then you have a real problem with stunted growth with your own plants. So make sure that you control your weeds at the early stage of their development. And it is spread through wind, the seeds of it, or water, people, animals, harvesting of crops. Yes. It lands between your crops and then you take it to other places, and that is how you can spread it. Birds and vegetative growth. Vegetative growth is actually the root system, growth underneath, and the same plant, and it's spread at the other, 1 or 2 meters from the mother plant, and then the new plant is growing out of the soil from the root system. So that is one way of how weeds can multiply, especially your small leaf grasses. Small leaf grasses, they have 2 ways of propagation: the seeds or through the root system. Okay, cultivation practices. The only way that I'm saying to us is not chemical or biological control, but the only method is the shovel and our fingers. Make sure you take out the full plant with its roots. The tractor, now, in our case, in my garden, is a shovel and my fingers. That is the best way to control my weeds. An important thing is in the early stage of their development. Harvesting, oh, that is what we want. That is our aim. These three youngsters sitting there, that is our aim, to harvest from our garden or community garden or our household garden. That is our achievement, our goal, to harvest our produce. And if the community is seeing this, if they see this, then that motivate them to start with their own gardens. It is so. People they don't want to buy in the beginning, but if they see that you start to harvest, then all of us are interested now, and if they can see you do the selling and everything is proving to you, then suddenly everyone wants to start with a garden. That is me here in front with cabbages. That was a project here in Inon that I started with a group. These three ladies. There's also a man, not me sitting there, but there are one man and this beautiful three ladies. This is a project that I've started here in Inon. And they've done very well with the green beans here. And more people were interested after they've seen what have happened here with us. And more people were interested in making garden. And it was really a positive way here in Inum to see how our people react after we have harvest. Yeah, luckily for us here, we do have water. So we don't have a problem here with water. We can see the irrigation pipe standing here up here. So this was our way of watering the green beans, and they've done very well. Yeah, with this green beans. Maybe I don't know. I think it's the end here.
Yes, this is the last slide.
And maybe we can just go, maybe just wrap up. Maybe positive things. We can maybe I all like to start with positive things when it comes to gardening. We all love to make garden. It is so, and it's a good way to relax in your garden, especially when you have a stressful day. So there's always a good thing when it comes to gardening. But mistakes that you always make is starting too large. And starting too large. I say rather start small in the beginning, especially when your water is a problem for you. Starting very small. Now, what is small? Small is generic. Small for me is a 5-meter length bed, 1 meter in size. Even if it is a community garden or an organizational garden, rather start small with 1 or 2 beds so that you use that as a learning process. Instead of going for 10 beds or 5 beds, then your water source becomes a problem. And then the plants dies and you are no longer interested. But the moment if you start small, that is the best way to start with your garden. The other mistake is also, in the beginning, people are very eager to start. And then it's a large group. Select the people who are part of you, who you know are interested in gardening. People who, maybe if it's a community garden and so on, people who do have a cabbages or a tomato plant in their yard. Then that is my understanding that you are interested in gardening. So if you are part of my group, I know you have that interest. But if Anadin has nothing in his yard and he are interested in, in gardening, what motivation is there in him that he are interested? So the moment that there's challenges, then most of our members drop out of the project. So make sure that you select people who have interests where maybe a cabbages or a green bean in their own yard. That is what I see. An important thing is start small. Don't start big. Otherwise, the chances that the project will flop or be a mistake, and then all of us lose interests in gardening. Rather start small and learn from them. Thank you
Great.
very much.